Conversation on race and policing began in response to the police killing of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. In this partnership between CSU San Bernardino and the Brennan Center for Justice, we hope to engage in ongoing discussions related to the history and current context of race, policing, and criminal justice with guests from diverse academic fields and backgrounds. Welcome all. Welcome to another chat of race and policing. I'd like to start by doing the land acknowledgement. We recognize that the California State University of San Bernardino sits on territories of ancestral land of the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, Yuhabatam. We recognize that every member of the California State University San Bernardino community has benefited from the continuous and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since its institution founded in 1965. Consistent with our values of community and diversity, we have responsibility to acknowledge that and make visible the university's relationship to Native peoples. By offering this land acknowledgement, we affirm indigenous sovereignty and will work to hold California State University San Bernardino accountable to the needs of the American Indian and indigenous people. I'd like to also say that I want to thank those that are involved in this ongoing series, which has been going on for 5 years. Matt Patino, Michael German, Mary Texeira, Amber Broaden, and Jeremy Murray, and Robie Madrigal. And I'd like to thank Finn, our information technology consultant, who has kept us running for 5 years, and we appreciate all that he does for us. And I'd like to pass it to Michael German, who's going to introduce our guest today.
Great. Thanks very much, Stan. We're very happy to have Kat Brooks back with us. She's been a guest on two previous episodes. Kat is a playwright, a poet, a theater artist, and an activist. She's the co-founder of the Anti-Police Terror Project and executive director of the Justice Teams Network. In 2018, she ran for mayor of Oakland, finishing second to the incumbent Libby Schaaf. She's the host of the KPFA show Law and Disorder, broadcast out of Berkeley, which exposes the cracks in our system and agitates for resistance and collectively builds a new world where all of us thrive. Kat, welcome back. We're really happy to have you, and it's a pleasure to see you again.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Hello, everybody. I'm Kat Brooks. I'm going to actually start like I always start, which was with a moment of silence for all the lives that have been stolen by the state. And by that, I mean by law enforcement directly. I also mean through intercommunal violence, because it is the state that creates those conditions and refuses to address them in a humane way that creates a lot of violence in our community and then lost lives. So far this year, law enforcement has murdered 204 people, and it's only March. So on that note, if we could just take a moment of silence for those lives. Okay. So as Mike said, the name of our organization is the Anti-Police Terror Project. We are going into our 15th year of existence, which blows all of our minds because who knew? We came out of the struggle for justice for a young man named Oscar Grant. Oscar Grant was murdered on New Year's Day in 2009 on the BART platform. Oscar and his friends had taken the BART to San Francisco to celebrate New Year's Eve. He was on BART because his mother, Mama Wanda, thought he'd be safer. On the way home, they got into it a little bit. There was a little bit of scuffle with another crew of folks. The police were called. Within minutes, Oscar and his friends had been body slammed, verbally assaulted. Bitch ass nigger was said over and over again. He was slammed into the ground. He was handcuffed and he was shot in the back by then BART police officer Johannes Meserly. That murder got caught on a bunch of cameras. So it's for y'all, social media and nothing like that's normal. In 2009, we were just sort of seeing, right, the use of this. And this was the first time that one of these modern day lynchings had been captured that way. It also happened to collide with a pretty intense recession. And so the material conditions for Black folks and brown folks were very dire and very intense. That resulted in explosion in the streets of Oakland. At that time, I was really just doing education reform, and I was in Las Vegas, which is where I'm from, born and raised. But I had driven back, and my daughter was 2. And a brother stopped me on the corner, and he said, "Sis, do you know where that rally is at?" And I was like, "What rally?" And he said, for that man that they killed." I didn't know what he's talking about. Parked in my parking spot, gathered my daughter, went upstairs, and I still had her in my arms, and I turned on social media, and the video was there, and that was it. I was changed forever. I was already an organizer. I was already an activist. I've been politically active basically my whole life. My mother was an organizer and activist, so I didn't really have a choice. But it was one of those moments where you knew that nothing was going to be the same. I was sick to my stomach. I couldn't stop crying. I was enraged, and I knew I had to do something. Um, and so I ended up volunteering for my communications. I used to be a communications director to earn my bread. I volunteered those skills to the coalition of nonprofits who had gathered to deal with what had happened to Oscar. And actually, they were really trying, what they had gathered to do in part was to contain the rage of the people, to um, usher them inside, to plan, activity around how to process their rage. But this is the town, and that didn't go over very well. Before I knew it, that coalition had sort of disappeared, fallen apart, in part because of the rejection by the masses. And myself and some other Black folks stepped into leadership. And that protracted struggle with the state, and it was a protracted struggle with the state. It was a violent struggle with the state. We were tear gassed, we were flashbanged, we were beaten, we were arrested. Um, it happened at the same time Arab Spring was happening. And this became an international conversation. There were folks in Egypt holding up signs saying, "I am Oscar Grant." That fight for justice, and justice is, I vacillate with whether or not I use that word, because the only justice would be that person coming back, right? Being able to sit at holiday dinners with their family, for Wanda to be able to hug her son again. But for the sake of whatever, I'll say justice. That struggle for justice for Oscar Grant kicked off what is now 15 years of struggle with the state. The longest, largest fight against state violence in the history of this country. Um, so for me, everything then changed after that. Then we were in the streets for several years, because then in Oakland, we were responding not just to the murders that were happening here. And at that time, the Oakland Police Department was the most murderous police department in Northern California. We built a movement that makes that not true anymore. They still beat, rape, etc. They do all that stuff, but they don't kill us, because every time they murdered us, every time we got wind of a murder somewhere else, we were in the streets by the thousands. The other thing that we did was we utilized communications, right? Narrative, the power of narrative, um, to impact how we talk about public safety. We stopped dealing with media outlets that referred to these people as suspects, right? We reminded them, like, for instance, Oscar, his favorite color was blue. He was a son, he was a father, like, he was a human being. These are human beings, because if we dehumanize them, if they are just suspects, or if they're just a Black man between the ages of 25 and 35 that was, suspected, which is often what happens, suspected of doing whatever, then humans have this amazing ability to be like, oh, well, he deserved it. I will remind us now, however, that police officers are not supposed to be judge, jury, and executioner. There is a system of due process in this country. So even if someone has engaged in an act of criminality, they have the right to due process. But for far too many Black and brown, poor, and even white, like that's as quiet as it's kept by the numbers, because there's majority of white people in this country, right? They actually get killed at higher number rates. Black folks and other folks of color, it's because per capita, right? For the amount of people that we are in this country, too many of us are being killed by law enforcement. So Anti-Police Terror Project was born out of out of a conversation with me and my co-founder in my kitchen after another one of these rallies, Asantwa Boykin, who said, bruh, that's how she started the sentence, bruh, what are we doing? I said, what do you mean? She said, well, we out here every other week. We shutting stuff down. We're interrupting stuff. People by the thousands. We're getting our asses kicked by police, but they keep killing us. She said, I feel like we're chasing dead Black bodies. And that was a really heavy moment for me as an organizer. I've been an organizer my entire adult life, and as a Black woman, and as someone fiercely committed to ending state terror. So APTP was born out of the rejection of the premise that we have no choice but to accept the fact that they're going to kill us, and all we can do is respond. APTP was born out of the premise that we should not only be moving when the state moves, we should not be moving after the fact, that actually our goal and our mission is to eradicate state terror from communities of color. As Miriam Kaba has taught us, the only way to do that, right? The state's never going to change, it's never going to reform, it's doing what it was built to do. The first police officers in this country were slave catchers and union crushers. And so the state, we couldn't wait for the state to change, right? So we had to change our engagement with the state. We had to create ways for our people, and this is very much done in the spirit of the Black Panther Party, to be able to rely on us, to learn to rely on each other for safety, for protection in the neighborhood, for responding to mental health crisis, for dealing with intimate partner violence, right? All of the ways that the state is enmeshed inside of our families and our communities for no reason. They're bad at it, right? 50% of the people that law enforcement murders have a disability, and half plus a little bit more of those are dealing with a mental health crisis. Why are we sending badges and guns to people that need care and compassion? Why are we sending badges and guns to somebody in an overdose? You can't arrest your way out of an overdose. There's absolutely, the cops do not have the skills to actually deal with that. Why even, and I'm a survivor of domestic violence as well as the state's intervention in that violence, meaning my husband at the time kicked the crap out of me and I went to jail, which is the story for so many Black and brown women in this country. And so what do? We stop calling. And we spend years just being battered, but we're not going to call the police because, quite frankly, we don't want our loved one killed, right? Even though they're enacting this violence on us. A lot of times, as the father of our children, we don't want them going away to prison. We don't want to get killed and we don't want to go to prison. We just want the violence to stop. But see, a violent system can never bring about peace. That's just facts. It can't happen. So the work of APTP has largely been about changing the narrative and the paradigm of what public safety is and should be. We do that through family support. We've got a family support group that meets every Sunday. It's on Zoom. We've got families as far away as Texas and Hawaii that join, and it's not just about supporting their trauma. There's a lot of folks making a lot of money right now, making sure these families stay in their trauma, right? That they need to be saved. We're not about the business of that. We're about empowering families to become the rightful leaders that they are inside of this movement. We do policy. When APTP first started, we didn't engage in policy because it was about reform, right? It was about saying we're going to fix this thing. And from where we sat, we were like, this thing isn't broken. So what are we trying to fix? And then we got off of our, college degree educated pedestals and really assessed the situation for our people. And we're like, this means it got to be all roads in. But if we're going to engage with the system, we're going to do it on our terms. And so we engage in things that we call radical reform, or other folks call non-reformist reform. And that means you're never going to see APTP or me supporting more body cameras, supporting wasting more millions of dollars to try to figure out if we should call it implicit bias or explicit bias instead of just racism. We're never going to do that, or more cultural competency training for law enforcement. That's not what we do. We engage in bills like the Crisis Act, which we got passed, that took I can't remember how much money, some money from the state to enable grassroots organizations to build alternative models for community response to community crisis. We engage in bills like SB2, which now a police officer can be decertified, right? So before, they could rape, they could maim, they could do whatever. And even if that meant that they left the department, they would just do what we call a lateral move to another department and continue their bad behavior somewhere else. We now have put in place a decertification process where they can, I mean, it's very flawed, this process, but they can, in theory, be decertified, right? We supported a bill that allowed for data to track data on racial profiling, right? And a report to get generated. So at least we know the numbers we're working with. So that's the kind of policy we do. We do organizing, of course. Organizing is about working with a community, not for a community, not above a community, working with the community, with the people to identify material conditions that they want changed, and then helping them enact a plan to get that change. Organizing is not calling for events on Twitter and Facebook. Organizing is not even just showing up at that event. And one of the things that happened really during COVID was that word got bastardized. Organizing is a craft. It requires training. It involves metrics, right? Strategy and tactic. So we organize. Right now, some of the campaigns that we're working on is Stop Cop Nation. So we're working on stopping those facilities being built in California, but we're part of a national coalition. We had worked really hard to reverse OPD's no bars hold chase policy. They want it back. So we're organizing to demonstrate that those things, chasing high-speed chases actually don't solve crimes. They don't prevent crimes. They don't make you more safe. They actually make you less safe, because far too often civilians are the ones that are harmed and hurt. 3 days actually after San Francisco, which is right over a bridge from us, changed their policy. 3 days. An elementary school girl was hit by a cop car, chasing someone who had engaged in a nonviolent offense. So organizing. We build alternative models for response to community crisis. Our flagship program is Mental Health First, which is all volunteer run. We have a hotline that we run from Friday to Sunday, both in Oakland and Sacramento. And we respond to mental health crisis, we respond to intimate partner violence, we help with safety planning, and we respond with substance abuse or substance utilization. What else we do? Oh, and we utilize healing justice as an organizing strategy. So the word like self-care popped up around 2014, 2015, became very prominent in our movement. And every time someone said it, I would twitch, right? I was raised up as an organizer in a very particular way, and it wasn't great. We don't do that anymore, but I was raised, work, smoke, drink, die. White supremacy doesn't sleep, and you don't either. And unfortunately, too many activists did die or become permanently disabled or break or whatever. And dead, broken activists are not helpful to the movement. But self-care insinuates that, okay, we got all messed up together, right? So I'm talking about Oscar Grant, for instance. We were in the streets at war with the state for a year. Now you go over there and you deal with yourself. That's actually not helpful. And then come back into the same conditions and get messed up again. So we reject that. We engage in collective healing. HJ as an organizing strategy, as an intentional interruption to the violence of white supremacy, right? To address our trauma, because we believe that trauma. So the Black Panther Party understood that if you were worried about a light bill, or if you were hungry, or if you were sick, it made it that much harder for you to struggle for your liberation. That is why they introduced 70, a lot of people only know about the free breakfast program, 70 survival programs to address the material conditions of the people they were trying to organize so that they then could be freed up to fight for their liberation. We believe trauma acts in the exact same way. And for Black folks, I'm going to talk about specifically, right? There's science now that shows that we carry in our cells, in our DNA, the trauma from the transatlantic slave trade, the trauma from chattel slavery, the trauma from Jim Crow, and then that gets compounded because we are born into traumatic situations. And every single day that we walk out the door, whether it's the police, whether it's our jobs, whether it's just being in public, whether it's our school systems, that trauma is compounded, but we got to push it down, push it down, push it down, push it down, so we can get our kids to school, so we can make a cup of coffee, so we can function inside of the system that we're told that we're supposed to function in. But trauma has to go somewhere. It doesn't just sit there, right? Trauma comes out in intercommunal violence, which is why I said what I said at the top of my talking to y'all, right? That's when a 12-year-old boy shoots another 12-year-old boy who looks just like him, that is trauma exploding, undealt trauma, intimate partner violence, mental health, right? Trauma has to go somewhere. The woman standing on the corner screaming in broad daylight because she got 6 kids and 5 jobs and she still can't make ends meet. It has to go somewhere. So we interrupt the trauma. We do a healing portal for the community where they can come get massages, and they can come get foot soaks, and they can come get NADA, the seeds or needles in the ear protocol, to help folks that are struggling with substance utilization. we address the trauma and we use that also as an opportunity to politically educate folks, organize them if they want to into the movement for their own liberation, right? We're trying to create a pipeline of folks that we are not representing, but a pipeline of folks that are able to represent themselves. I have a few more things to say, and I know we got questions, so I'm trying to jump through it, but I want to give context. I don't know what level of acumen, right, folks walked into this room with. So why we call it terror? We call it terror because terror is defined as the calculated use of violence or the threat of violence to instill fear and coerce or intimidate governments or societies, communities, in pursuit of political, religious, or ideological goals. Remember, I said that the first police were slave catchers and union crushers, right? The violence of policing is meant to maintain the status quo. The violence of policing is meant to protect property, which Black folks at one time were considered, not people, right? That is the basic tenet of what policing in this country is. They are trained to shoot first, ask questions later. They are trained to deal with a suspect, right, as quickly as possible. So if we're talking about someone that doesn't share our reality, you send a cop there and it will go from 60 to 500 real fast because the uniform, because chances are they've been brutalized, they've been unnecessarily incarcerated, right? But second of all, the other thing is that they're not going to move as fast as law enforcement officials want them to move, which then in their eyes makes them a threat, right? And that's how people end up getting murdered, quite frankly. And police violence isn't just when they kill us, and I've touched on this a little bit, so homicide, of course, but most people actually survive police violence. That's the majority of people. We, myself included, are walking around here with the trauma and the scars from our violent interactions with law enforcement. So it's also assault, right? Sexual violence. Sexual violence is actually the predominant way that women of color, Black women in particular, experience state violence. Robbery. I don't know how much, they take folks' money, they take folks' drugs, off they go, they leave the person, and then that stuff, disappears into thin air. Um, and then I think the last thing that I want to say, because I think it's really important, is a few words about the current moment that we're in. So we have a person that is sitting in the White House who loves law enforcement. We have a person sitting in the White House who has said they should have a day. Cops should have a day where they can just go out and do whatever they want with impunity. We have someone in office who is going to arrest and terrorize until they get their way, right? So we're seeing things that we did gain, because there were gains. There have been gains the last 15 years. We're seeing those things interrupted and or reversed. We're seeing his campaign promises come true, which more retention and training, increased protections when they harm folks, and indemnification, which means that they're not liable for the damage. We're seeing in the organizations like mine and others, right? And all of the social justice organizations were intertwined, right? Because it's one movement. Each of us are just working on our piece of it. Funding reversals or freezes, thank God. APTP, as you can imagine, has never gotten federal funds. But philanthropists right now are sitting on their hands. There are so many of us now in a fiscal crisis because philanthropy, which has always been problematic in our movements, is sitting on their hands because they're scared of what Trump might do, and they don't want to lose their money if they give it to us and Trump takes it. So they're sitting on it, which makes it harder to do the work, right? We're looking at what's happening with a woman's right to choose, which isn't just about that. It's also about removing funds from these clinics, which for poor folks, for poor Black women, for poor Indigenous women, are the places where they get their health care, right? Where they deal with all of the other things. We're dealing, as we've seen, with immigration. Biden paved the way with massive investments in private detention centers and expansion, just teed it up for Trump. That's moving. So what do we do, right? There's a few things. We need to push electeds and those empowered to make data-driven decisions. And what I mean by that, there is evidence. The data shows more police doesn't mean less crime. The data shows, right, that they are not the people to be responding to mental health crisis or intimate partner violence. But we keep doing the same thing over and over again, and they do it for feel-good headlines and to give people the illusion of safety. My friend Andrea Ritchie says, I don't understand how safe people think they can feel. We are on a rock spinning a bazillion miles an hour. Is something we don't even understand. So safety is an illusion. Um, find a good organization, follow, learn from older heads in the movement, right? And then adapt for your generation, but the rules of organizing be the rules of organizing. I've already talked about organizing is not social media posts. Do the work. And you don't have to put your body on the line, right? Like I did. I can vouch for the fact that tear gas tastes like crap. But we don't just need that. We need communicators. We need people to take care of the kids. We need people to deliver groceries. We need people to build online security systems for, right? There's so many things to do. So I'm gonna say this last thing and I'm gonna shut up. Um, find the thing that makes your heart sing, whether it's in this issue or the bazillion issues that we got on this planet, because there's a lot of them. Find the thing that makes your heart sing and do that. But you got to do something. Being here ain't rent free. Yes?
Thank you, Kat. That was really fantastic and hopeful. You know, what a lot of people are asking me now, because I think you described it exactly right. We're kind of in this crisis period where our democracy is crumbling, and we have a wannabe authoritarian who is doing things that are unprecedented and targeting so many different people at the same time, one right after another. And you know what I always say is look for the helpers. And you know, I think you and the organizations that you're working with are those helpers, and that we don't need to build the wheel. The wheel is built. We just need to be spokes and add to the strength of that wheel.
Yeah.
So we put links to your programs in the chat, but for people in the audience who perhaps aren't in Oakland or aren't in a place, or as you said, you know, that what moves them isn't necessarily a policing issue. It might be an immigration issue or some other issue. Where should they look? Where do they look to find organizers like you that are doing the work, that know how to organize, as you suggest?
Uh, a couple of things, right? So first, if you identify an organization that let's say there's someone that's out there that wants to do the work, right? Or you encounter other people that are doing the work, that have been vetted, that clearly are respected by community, etc. Ask them, right? So if somebody is in California, and actually across the country, I am connected to the folks that are actually doing the work. If you go online, I guarantee you on any social media platform, there are bazillion links to organizations that are doing the work of the thing that you care about. You have to be careful though, because one of the things that happens in this current moment is there's a lot of money flowing to groups that say they're going to fight Trump. A lot, right? And so the person that used to save the seals is now saying that they're going to inform and educate and empower the community to fight Trump, but they don't know how to do that. They know how to save seals. So you got to be careful, right, about folks that are just chasing the dollar. Um, and locate the older movement heads in your community. Ask them. They know. They know.
And for people who might be listening who want to support your organizations, what's the best way for them to either support you through funding or through volunteer services?
Yeah, so we are volunteer. We are a lot volunteer run in our programs. So we train our volunteers. So that's a great way. And I will just say, in this particular financial climate, if you can give, please go to antipoliceterrorproject.org and give. We've got folks, right? We've got even low income folks. Well, actually, low income folks in this country give more money than the rich folks do
Right.
annually. That give $5 a month, right? Or $10 a month, or whatever they can a month. And those dollars add up. And they're the ones that are actually the most important, because those are the dollars that we get to use if a family member needs us to pay the light bill. Those are the funds that we get to use, right? If I need to go holler at an elected and I'm over my 10% lobbying time that I'm allowed because I'm a C3. Those are the dollars that we use to feed the people, right? Things that foundations, poo-poo on. Those are things we use for bail support. So when things pop off, APTP, my folks are up all night taking calls to bail people out of prison, particularly Black and brown folks, and particularly Black and brown trans folks, right? Because those places are very dangerous for those people. No foundation is going to let me use the money for that. So it will be put to good use. And join us, follow us on all of our socials, and share our stuff. We put out a lot of information. Like I talked about earlier, the power of narrative. The right understands that. There's a reason why you were bombarded with the kinds of messages you were bombarded by, even on so-called liberal media platforms, right? The right understands and they're really, really good at it. We got to get better at it. We have to become an echo chamber. So we should be sharing far and wide, learning about the issues so you can talk about it uh, eloquently and in an informative and inspiring way. But we got to do better. We got to do better on the left.
And there's that old axiom that crisis also provides opportunity.
That's
And
right.
one of the things that we're seeing, despite the bipartisan rejection of the defund police movement, here with the cut in federal funding includes, something that's on the board are these COPS grants that are federal funds that go to state and local policing, and those are significant. That drives a lot of the purchasing the weaponry and providing a lot of this very militaristic training that police receive, that put them in that position where they believe that every community member they're engaging with is a potential threat to their lives. Do you see any opportunity in that possibility that less funds will be available, of how for policing that we can prevent them finding new ways to fund the police and instead fund programs like the mental health initiative?
Well, you actually lifted up a bullet that I didn't say, which is don't agonize, organize. Right? This is the time. There are all kinds of opening, and the people are awake and ready, to move. I mean, as you were talking, like yes, yay, less money for cops. Like when we was getting the FBI, we were like, right on.
Right, right.
um, um, and what I know, my lived experience is the state will find a way to survive. And probably the way the song and dance will go is the same way the song and dance went with defund. Because for a minute, right, when we were in the street, the Democrats were like, "Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes." And as soon as the clapback came from the right, they went back to cowering. And the way that the state did the clapback to defund, right, is they exploited the economic conditions that were created by the pandemic that happened to coincide with the national cry to take money away from the police and put it into programs that actually keep us safe, and blame folks like me and blame the defund. And they said that there was they created an echo chamber across the country that said crime was rising or violent crime was happening because defund had happened. Well, what is true is defund did not happen. The exception of Seattle, it didn't happen. And in Minneapolis, where George Floyd was murdered, they promised, right? Like they made a lot of noise about they was going to do it, but it never happened. So I say all that to say that will be the song and dance, right? They will find conditions to exploit. They will fearmonger the people and say, you're not safe, and you're not safe because cops can't do their job because we don't have the money and we don't have enough police. So what you need to advocate is this. Now, we on our side will continue to do the data-driven stuff. We will look at like, well, I mean, if this lasts long enough, what has the impact been for our folks without more cops on the streets?
Mhm.
Right? We put together those data points and we advocate for them. I don't believe in this climate, however, because it's not just Trump, right? Even Oakland, the birthplace of the Black Panther Party, our political pendulum swung hella far to the right. It's the people. So again, the power of narrative, because we got to gain some ground back. But I don't see local, state, or federal governments being like, oh, we defunded them, but we can slide you a little bit of money. Unfortunately.
Stan, you have any questions?
Fantastic. You've answered almost all of my questions. And my first question was going to be on terror, and you popped that one right out. And then here's the one you just got through answering, was balancing dehumanization by the other side to make your organization like you're the problem. So here's my question. In the early days, who did you collaborate with as you went through your journey? And then today, who do you collaborate with that assists you and your organizations to do, for people, numbers of people, small organizations, different affiliations? Who do you collaborate with? And who did you collaborate in the early days with? Just like you said, the Black Panther Party was there.
Yes, and I have the deep, deep honor of being in pretty fairly regular contact with those elders. Um, so when I came to Oakland to work in education reform, I had the blessing of being connected with the Black August Organizing Committee. Um, the Black August Organizing Committee, for folks' edification, was birthed in San Quentin by a group of brothers in response to the state violence that was happening there. The prison system response to the Black Liberation Movement, right, was to brutalize, because a lot of folks were being arrested and thrown into jail for the fighting for Black liberation. Comrade George Jackson, people should look him up. Um, and so as part of the resistance, Black August was born. And it's in August, it's a month where on the inside they fast, they work out every day, they do political study, they don't buy anything from commissary, um, and they focus on resistance. And there's days within the month that are dedicated to different people that were murdered by the state. I was sitting at that table with one of the founders, Baba Shaka at Thinnen, who's not here anymore. And so there was work with them, and then Malcolm X grassroots movement. And the other thing that had happened during that year of protracted struggle with Oscars is it wasn't just, us in the streets. It was a coalition of organizations, um, uh, like APEN, Asian Pacific Environmental Network, like Courage, Communities United for Restorative Youth Justice, like, shoot, we were even working with the skinny jean anarchists at that point. It was hard, but we did it. I've got people like Terha Ak, who is a co-founder of APTP and also the co-founder of Community Ready Corps, and who I think is one of the most brilliant movement strategy minds in the country of our time. I'm trying to get him to put stuff out there more. Um, in partnership with impacted families, right? Um, I'm trying to think of other significant folks. Walter Riley and Dan Siegel, who are legendary movement attorneys, were part of our work. Mm, and some other folks. And today, a lot of those formations don't exist anymore.
Yes.
Right. The fact that, and I should just say that APTP was a volunteer run with $100,000 budget for 13 of our 15 years. Unheard of. But we still work with Courage. We still work with Walter and Dan. We work with Bay Rising. Folks may California Rising maybe what people are aware of right now. We work with immigration folks, right? We have been solidly in support of a free Palestine as long as we've been in existence. And I want to uplift Mahmoud Khalil right now, the first disappeared person of Trump's promise to disappear anybody that wants a free Palestine. Um, so yeah, immigration folks, Palestine folks, critical resistance, right? They're a national formation, birthed by Angela Davis that does prison work, um, still impacted families. And what I'm excited about right now, who we're working with, right? Because our office is in the hood, we're in the bottoms of Oakland, um, are the people inside of the housing projects there. We're working with them. So that we got folks in Campbell Village. You all can just imagine what that means. It's named Campbell Village, that are getting acupuncture, that are getting foot soaked,
Mhm.
and then are being asked, here's some seat, being taught how to do it for themselves and then take it back to their home. That I think is the greatest joy in terms of who we're working with right now.
So are you finding that type of thing as opposed to hitting the streets, uh, not more rewarding, but the new trend?
I think we need all roads in, right? I think there definitely should be people younger than me that are out there in the streets and giving the state help, because the truth is the state doesn't change. It just gives us concessions to make us go back inside. You check any of the cycles, right? Their aim is to get us out of the streets. So they'll say, okay. So for here, for instance, when we were trying to launch a police commission, right? They were like, no, no, no. Well, that struggle happened to also come about a time where a young woman, Celeste Guap, revealed that she had been raped and trafficked while she was underage by 14 law enforcement agencies across the bay. So we was in the streets and we had a demand, right? And we got that demand met because we were in the streets. At the same time, other folks, because that wasn't my jam at the time, were working on the inside with the powers that be to get the legislation drafted. So it's got to be an inside out strategy. For me, like I said, our mission is to stop it from happening in the first place. And yes, for me, that is more rewarding because just like if you have to call the police, right, something has already happened. Right? Somebody's dead, somebody's been raped, somebody's been harmed, which is why we talk about investing in prevention. Same thing, like if you're calling APTP, what that used to mean is that somebody was already dead, right? Somebody had already been raped, somebody has already been harmed. So our whole intent and purpose and focus is to stop it from happening. And so the majority of my focus now, yeah, is on healing our people to fight and interrupting systemic violence by providing the folks with alternative pathways to get the help and support that they need.
And you talk about defunding the police, and I know we've been doing this for 5 years now, and every time something happens, everyone starts yelling defund the police, and the end result is the police get a bigger budget.
You know, I had this aha moment, and I people have been telling me I need to write a book for a minute, and I think I finally figured out what I'm going to write about. We've been doing it wrong. So to your point, we were screaming defund the police, defund the police, defund the police. The state clapped back. We were focused on was the cops, right? And that did result in more cops, bigger budgets, more public support for law enforcement because the majority of folks still believe that cops keep them safe. Facts. And for people, low-income people of color, it creates cognitive dissonance because we're clear that those are the same people that put us in danger, and that's our only pathway, for support and help. And so we've got to interrupt that narrative, and we need to actually shift our focus more fully on interrupting access. We need to be talking about the ways in which we keep each other safe. We need to be talking about the data of how early childhood education allows folks to, right? We need to be talking about alternatives for people to get help for mental health crisis. We need to stop being so black and white about people that utilize substances. Not everybody wants to be completely sober. That's just a fact. They shouldn't sit in prison for it, right? So how do we interrupt in those ways? So I concur with you. People aren't saying defund so much anymore. They're saying redirect, and that's still an important demand. So I'll take it here in Oakland. So for most of y'all, if you look, the police department gets the majority of your general funds, things that could be used to create non-carceral response to community crisis, things that could be used to fix potholes, make the parks cleaner, things that could be used to help people get supportive instead of carceral punishment, treatment for substance utilization. All of that money goes to the cops, all of it. Here in Oakland, we are facing a $90 million deficit that is going to grow because we spend so much money on cops, not just their salaries, but their pensions and their benefits, their unfunded liabilities. It's not sustainable. We've been ringing that alarm bell for 10 years, and here we are. And yet, and still, in our last budget cycle, everything, every social safety net department was slashed. Cops got $30 million more. So we can't stop making the demand, right? We've got to get better at talking about why we're making the demand. We've got to get better at talking about what the impact will be as we do this.
I think that's exactly right. And targeting this narrative that police keep us safe, I think is really important. And there is data, right? We know that half of the violent crime in this country goes unsolved, and that includes almost half of the murders, more than 60% of the rapes. And yet there's evidence, rape kits sitting on crime lab shelves untested because the police aren't doing that kind of work and aren't really doing community safety, at least not doing it effectively. I mean, one of the things that I point out that happened in Oakland is, the police response to the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020 was extremely militant because they had this fear of the protesters that you've talked about. But at the same time, there was a group of far-right militants who planned, organized, and executed two Department of Homeland Security security officials, using a Black Lives Matter rally as a diversion, knowing that the police would be putting resources there rather than looking into this group. And this was a group that included a man who was part of the US military counterterrorism security apparatus, right? So it's not like this is happening in some obscure place. This is happening inside these agencies. And yet the police don't see that as a threat to themselves. And one of the things you said is that Trump is a big law enforcement supporter, but he only supports a certain kind of law enforcement, a very lawless law enforcement. He certainly didn't support all those law enforcement officers who were beaten on January 6th, right? That it's very selective. And, but even to this day, if you talk about threats to police, they don't look at COVID as a threat, even though for 2 years that was the #1 killer of police officers. They don't look at far-right militants. They don't even count the number of people far-right militants kill every year, while they keep a focus on activist movements and particularly led by people of color, whether it's Black Lives Matter or the Standing Rock Water Protectors. And one of the things that has frustrated me since the election is there has been a tremendous amount of energy spent on, how do the Democrats create a Joe Rogan type figure when there's Cat Brooks' radio show, Law and Disorder, right? I mean, there are people who are doing this work, who are getting the message out, and yet they don't want, or they don't appear to want to support that kind of work. It's like they're always looking in the wrong places. How do we get the attention, or do we just say, okay, they're not helpers, we have to focus on helpers?
We say they're not helpers and we need to focus on helpers, right? So the Democratic Party is just the other side of the same penny as the Republic. Like, they're all invested in protecting the status quo, right? I mean, that's just what it is. And I just got to a place in my political, and I, as you read in my bio, like, I ran for office, but I was running for office to blow it up, right? I figured I would get like 3 months in that seat and I'd be dead or recalled, one of the two. But we do have people in office, right? Like, I'm excited. I'm very excited. My friend Latifah Simon, right, has walked into the belly of the beast to do the good work. We're never going to get free with the master's tools. And we're never going to get liberated inside of those halls of power. It's just not going to happen. So we have to look at that as a tool inside of the toolbox, right? Like, and when does it make sense? Like, just like when you're deciding whether you're going to use a hammer or a wrench, where does it make sense to engage those folks when we doing other things? And for me, we've got to build it for ourselves. That is actually the thing that scares the state the most. The reason why the Panthers Breakfast Program was called the biggest threat to national security is because the people were supporting the people, and that then unlocks this thing in your brain where you go, oh, I actually don't need you. And if I don't need you, then I don't have to succumb to your oppression. In fact, I'm healed enough. I'm gonna fight your oppression while I continue to take care of my community, and that's why, right? The party had to go, and people were murdered and arrested and incarcerated and all that stuff. So I believe that we are all we got. We take care of us. Yeah, and we're more than capable. We can grow food. We can start schools, right? Purpose of the HJ stuff in the clinics, we're barreling towards opening a completely abolitionist long-term trauma facility where folks that are suffering from some of the issues that we've talked about today can go get supportive help, not incarcerated help, People are doing, and people are doing it all over. And the other thing that's important to know is that this ain't new. Like we've always taken care of ourselves, right? Like black folks weren't, in 19 whatever calling the police. Nah, we took care of ourselves. And so I see this as one of the opportunities of Trump's second reign of terror, right? We ain't gonna have no choice but to depend on ourselves. We ain't gonna have no choice but to learn how to do it for ourselves, and then we can sustain that, right? We need to rationalize what people consider radical.
Mm.
Uh, that's the goal over these next 4 years.
And in that, how do you take on the challenges of new laws? In other words, when things are going great for your organization, someone to come up with some kind of law that what you're doing is wrong, something that you're doing is wrong, and so we'll do it this way. And then you go up, move forward, and they say, oh, they're feeding they need a permit to do that now, or they need this to do that. They're always challenging people that are doing their own thing.
Yeah, they've tried it. I don't care. I don't listen to things like that. I don't get permits to march. I don't get permits to feed the people. I don't when we have block parties outside the bill, I don't get these are our streets and these are our people, and I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. And right and that's a choice that I've made. That if that then results in me taking fiscal hits or incarceration or whatever in order to serve the people, I've made a conscious decision, not a romanticized decision, because again, if I'm locked up, I can't be very useful. But I don't, the state doesn't dictate what I do in my struggle for liberation. The state is why I'm struggling for liberation, right? They don't, and that's how I think everybody should be. I think you do the work that you need to do to support your folks, right? And F the state, right? Because they are going to pass laws, they are going to interrupt, they are going to threaten. And this is also something that's also really important. When I said you need to be working with the community, right? Not for or above you need to be in deep relationship with the community because what OPD knows, what city council knows in the city of Oakland, California, if they come for me in particular ways, the community is going to respond. I ain't even have to do nothing. They're gonna have a problem in these streets. If they come for APTP, they're gonna have a problem in these streets. That's not because we big and bad and all that. It's because we are in deep, deep relationship with the people. The people are always going to be your best defense, right? Because they calculate, is this move worth what's coming? So you be sure that you got a powerful what can come as your clapback to the state's bullshit.
Thank you. We're getting close, but I got one more question. WAG has been around from 1972, and we've been doing community activism and community forums we meet every Monday, and we've been doing that since 1972. And what we've found is on the local level, so much corruption, so much racism, so much ill-gotten gains and ill talk of people that are good people. So I know Oakland for you is a local level, but when you talk about being engaged, what do you say to people that are also in other cities and having to do the same type of thing you're doing, but at a smaller level?
I mean, I say the same thing, right? To be in relationship with the people. What you're talking about goes back to vetting who you engage with, right? Um, one of the horrific things actually about Black Lives Matter was that philanthropy once again got to celebritize and monetize our movement, right? I mean, you ain't supposed to be famous doing this work, right? You're supposed to make millions of dollars do this work. You're supposed to get 10,000, 15, $20,000 to do speaking engagements. That's not the business, right? And that power money corrupts. That adage is very true. So be sure that you vet folks, um, and be in relationship with the folks. So one more Black Panther Party story. The very first, one of the very first things that the party did, right? The party was born literally to deal with police violence. Like they were watching people be brutalized regularly. Joan Tarika Lewis, the first woman of the party, has told me in great detail the things that they were witnessing, right? Because police departments recruited Klan members from the South to come down here. So it's pretty gross. But anyway, came to be that there was this intersection in Oakland that didn't have a stoplight, and Black kids were getting hit and hurt and dying, and the people had gone and asked the city, right, to put a light thing in. City wouldn't do it, city wouldn't do it. So the Panthers went and started walking children, women, elders across the street to make sure that they would do it safely. Well, guess what the state did? They put in a light stop, a stoplight. But by that point, right, the Panther Party was endeared to the community, right? And the community often, will protect you. And my point is, they responded to what the community needed. They didn't lead with what they set out to do.
Yeah, that's great. We actually had a gentleman on our show from the Black Panther Party, and he talked about just that, what you're talking about, and the different things that they did that embraced the community. And while the cops are trying to take them out, they're being embraced by the community, and it made it harder for the police to get close to them and deal with them. So yeah. So I want to thank you for being here, Kat, and I mean I can talk to you forever, because you got so much information and you've been doing it for so long that you have an answer. And sometimes your answer is simple. It's just keep doing what you're doing, or stop doing that and do something different. But I know, Mike, you want to say a few words?
I just want to say, thank you for all that you're doing. It's been a pleasure to be in conversation with you now multiple times. And if I can ever be helpful to you or any one of your organizations, I'd be happy to.
I think your work is pretty dope too. So
thank you.
All right, are we good?
We good. Thank you.
Everybody. Right.
Conversation on Race and Policing has been supported by funding from the California State University, San Bernardino College of Social and Behavioral Sciences, Pfau Library, and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Tin Lee is our technical consultant. Pamela Crafton provides administrative support, and Alan Yorba provides communication support. There's more information in the show notes, and please join us online at csusb.edu/CORP for upcoming programming, and find our catalog of over 100 past events with guests like Robin D.G. Kelly, Jamal Bowman, and Dorothy Roberts, and many more.